Number 12 Squadron of the Royal Australian Air Force was formed on the 6th of February 1939 at Laverton, Victoria, as a general-purpose unit under squadron leader Charles Eaton. Initially equipped with 4 Hawker Demon biplane fighters and 4 Avro Anson maritime reconnaissance aircraft, training began in May 1939, focusing on navigation, instrument flying, night operations, interception, bombing and gunnery. The squadron relocated to Darwin, starting in July 1939, with the advance party arriving on the 24th of July and aircraft by late August. 7 Ansons initiated reconnaissance patrols on the 31st of August, while Demons were phased out for CAC Wirraways by September. Operations emphasized escorting shipping, maritime reconnaissance, and coastal patrols, with flying curtailed in September and October to construct aerodrome facilities. By June 1940, the squadron had split to form Station Darwin and Number 13 Squadron, transferring Ansons and retaining sea flight with Wirraways for anti-submarine and maritime duties, including joint exercises with the Navy and Army from July 1940 onward. Relocated to Darwin's new military airfield in April 1941, the squadron had 18 Wirraways by May.
Our postings came. I went to Number 12 Squadron Darwin with a number of others who had been on my course. And we had Australia's frontline fighter, the Wirraway, capable of 140 miles per hour.
Under squadron leader Ian McLaughlin, from June 1940, the unit focused on defensive patrols and training, including gunnery and bombing exercises. As part of Northwestern Area Command, it conducted joint operations with the Navy for convoy escorts and Army for searchlight cooperation, building readiness amid escalating global tensions. The squadron's role was vital in protecting Australia's northern approaches, though its Wirraways, limited to 140 miles per hour, were increasingly seen as inadequate against potential Japanese threats. During the early months of 1940, the squadron's activities were expanded to include gunnery and bombing training, and a Number 9 Squadron Supermarine Seagull was attached to the unit to assist with air gunnery practice. The squadron continued to conduct anti-submarine and maritime patrols and began a program of exercises with Royal Australian Navy and Australian Army units based at Darwin from July 1940. By early 1941, new pilots joined the squadron. Robert Crawford, fresh from training, joined a flight of 4 brand new Wirraways north from Point Cook, a 3-day journey that marked the beginning of his year in Darwin.
After leave, I got posted down to Point Cook, where I joined the CO of 12 Squadron, and he was down there picking up brand new aeroplanes to take back to refurbish the aircraft they had up in Darwin. We were there for a week, and there was 4 aircraft, squadron leader Clary Glasscock, Flying Officer George Shave, another Air Force Empire Air Scheme pilot by the name of Lou Wettenhall, and another Air Force Empire Air Scheme bloke, Alan Tutt, and myself. We made up the rest of the aircrew. I might add that a Wirraway only carries 2 people. That's a pilot and a navigator. So with the 4 aircraft we had was 8 people.
In April 1941, Number 12 Squadron relocated to Darwin's new military airfield, achieving full strength with 18 Wirraways by May. The unit intensified training and patrols, including Army cooperation exercises and naval convoy escorts. The squadron increased its flying in the later months of 1941 as war with Japan became increasingly likely. Preparations included joint manoeuvres with the Australian Imperial Force and Royal Australian Navy, heightened anti-submarine patrols using advanced operating bases, and advanced training in bombing and gunnery. Darwin's tropical nights were pitch black, perfect for training. Every week, 12 squadron pilots flew into the glare of Army searchlights, testing nerves and instruments in one of the most unforgiving exercises of the war.
Searchlight cop, which is a very intrepid sort of a exercise, because being up in the tropics, they're very dark nights, and we used to fly from about 7 o'clock, and I'd train in the Army searchlight crews, and if they picked you up in the searchlight, because they were very tenacious, they wouldn't let you go, and irrespective of what you did, they held on to you until such times as you flew out of the range of them. And I think at that stage they had a three-pin effort that you flew along, and once one of the searchlights picked you up, another two got onto you, so you had three searchlights on you all the time, and as you flew out of range of one searchlight, another searchlight picked you up, so until such times as you flew right out of range, you were always in the glare of the searchlights, which involved you sort of flying on instruments all the time.
These drills were crucial as tensions mounted with Japan's advances, preparing pilots like Crawford for the defensive role in Australia's northern defences. Training with No. 12 Squadron included practice bombing off Darwin's coast. As a ground staff member, Harry Mason sometimes rode as a passenger to spot bomb impacts, a role that nearly ended in disaster during one high dive run.
And this was one particular place off the coast in the vicinity of Darwin, and it was only visible at low tide. But they had a large white circle painted on it, and in that circle was a metal triangle, pyramid, painted white. Now, for practice bombing, you could have low level, where the aircraft would come across and just drop an 8.5 pound practice bomb, which was a smoke bomb, and it was quite visible when the pilot dropped it. And they would want someone sitting in the back seat, such as a ground staff member, such as I was, to look and pinpoint where the bomb hit. But more generally, the pilot themselves looked around and they could plot how good they were. Sometimes, if the bombing was low level, they'd just come over parallel. But if it was high dive, they'd be up to 7,000 feet, make a dive onto the target, drop the bomb, and then pull out of it. And one trip I was on sitting in the back seat, and we pulled out of the dive, and the pilot was looking around over the side, and I'd seen it, but I was watching the speedo. It had been up to 300 miles an hour, and he was still looking back, and he's still climbing, and I'm thinking, we're going to get a stall out of this, and at this height, we won't get out of it. So I kicked on the rudder pedal and woke him up. He threw the control column forward, and we came back to level flight. And I breathed again. But it could have been a disaster, for both of us. And they'd have lost an aircraft.
Life in No. 12 Squadron wasn't all patrols and drills. Harry embraced the squadron's hockey team, playing 2 seasons a year in the wet and dry, forging bonds while earning nicknames like Golden Boys from the Army and Navy rivals.
I had 18 months in Darwin, and there's one part about that I was very much enjoyed. We had the hockey team up there. Of course, I was into that. And instead of just 1 season a year, we played 2 seasons a year, the wet season and the dry season. So in the normal course of 1 year, I got 2 seasons of hockey playing. So we had a very good team up there. We played the Army and the Navy and a couple of other civilian teams. And the Army were pretty strong with us. There's you wouldn't say jealousy, but a difference between us. We were known as the Golden Boys, the Tizzies, and I suppose that earned us the reputation.
Cricket was also particularly popular, with the squadron fielding a strong 12 Squadron Cricket 11 that played regular matches against Army and Navy teams at Darwin Oval, often drawing large crowds and reinforcing the Golden Boys nickname through the Air Force's perceived privileges. These activities helped alleviate the strains of extended tours in the remote Northern Territory, where personnel endured low pay, stalled promotions, and isolation, contributing to broader morale issues. At this time, 12 Squadron would fly long-range missions across the vast coastline of northern Australia. One such flight, to deliver bombs to a remote mission strip, would push navigation, fuel, and luck to the absolute limit.
And the new mission had a sort of a sandy strip or sandy aerodrome there. But in this particular time, we flew down. There was 3 aircraft. Flight Lieutenant George Shave was leading, and there was Lou Wettenhill and myself with 3 navigators, and we delivered 1,000 pounds of bombs down there. They weren't armed, but we just delivered them there. That was 250-pound bombs under each aircraft. We flew from Darwin to Wyndham, where we refueled, and then we had to fly approximately northwest to Drysdale River Mission.
After hitting the coast without sighting Drysdale River Mission, the formation searched for over an hour, flying north and south along the coastline. Flight Lieutenant Shave Force landed near a hut, the only visible sign of habitation. Lou Wittenhall attempted to land, but jettisoned his bombs into the water. Bob remained airborne, instructing his navigator via two-way radio to relay that he would continue north to a point of no return and land with the others if unsuccessful. Radio communication then indicated the mission lay further north, so he proceeded alone.
I was very fortunate because having been there before, I got there and found the aerodrome, and with no petrol at all, I landed the wrong way into the sandy strip at that time, and I looked like finishing up in a river creek bed, dry of course, but at the end of the run I just had to take a violent manoeuvre and ground loop the aircraft so as it wouldn't go down in the riverbed, and being a sandy strip we slid sideways for about 15 yards before we stopped and didn't do any damage to the aircraft or anything, and we sort of pulled it out of the sort of a ditch, and that was that. The funny thing about that too was that the reason they said that we got lost was that we were carrying magnetic bombs, which influenced the compass on the aircraft, but I think that's a lot of hogwash. We just got lost.
Crawford's anecdote captures the squadron's learning curve, especially in the face of the vast terrain of the Northern Territory. In October, Eaton was replaced as Officer Commanding RAAF Station Darwin by Group Captain Frederick R.W. Scherger, who had come from leading No. 2 Service Flying Training School. Promised a 12-month tour in Darwin before a transfer to Singapore, Harry Mason and his mates in No. 12 Squadron grew frustrated as months stretched on without promotion or relief. In late 1941, they staged a bold protest to force change.
We had expected, they were told down in the south, you'll spend 12 months in Darwin and then you'll be transferred to Singapore, which all wanted action. Singapore was, they thought, was going to be in the forefront of that, Europe was going, of course. And so we thought that after 12 months we'd be transferred to Singapore. But 12 months came and went, and we staged decided to make some sort of a protest about us, because I was in grade 3, I think, in pay. It was figured that we would, on this particular day, we're all formed up in our different flights. There were 3 squadrons in Darwin, 12 Squadron, Wirraways, 13 Squadron, Lockheed Hudson's, the bombers, and the administration, Headquarters Squadron. So we selected the day when was a big parade, and after they called the roll, orders are read out, figures for the day, what the duties were, and then the commander of each flight would say, "Fall out the sick." Those who were going on sick parade about turned and went off and formed up at the rear of the column. So when everyone knew about it, the officers, and I remember the officer in charge of us, he said, "Fall out the sick," and a big smirk. And with the exception of about two, we all turned and marched out, and so this happened with the other three squadrons, until there were about 300 assembled at the back.
So it was on the 17th of October 1941 that Number 12 Squadron's personnel staged a mass sick parade protest alongside Numbers 13 and Headquarters Squadrons. The unit had endured extended tours without relief, low pay, around 6 shillings daily, and stalled promotions, with many seeking advanced training in Melbourne for career progression. This event, involving about 300 airmen, reflected broader morale issues in remote postings, leading to eventual rotations a few months later. The squadron continued patrols despite low morale, with replacements arriving to relieve long-serving ground crew like Mason. This period marked the height of tensions as the Air Force prepared for a possible Japanese invasion. On the 7th of December 1941, a radio bulletin shattered the routine. Pearl Harbor had been bombed. For 12 Squadron in Darwin, the Pacific War was no longer distant, it was at their very doorstep.
When Pearl Harbor was bombed, everything seemed to jump into line in Darwin, and everything was moving at a fast rate, and we couldn't do very much except fly around in our Wirraways trying to do some good. But the 13 Squadron, 12 Squadron seemed to move away over to Indonesia and do a lot of work there. And we then started to get American flying fortresses coming through Darwin and staging their way up to the Philippines. And eventually things started to go very bad in the war, when the Japanese coming down, going through Hong Kong, the Philippines, and Malaysia and Burma, and then they were getting very close to Singapore. Singapore fell, and things were really getting very awkward in Sydney, or in Darwin, I should say.
Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor thrust Number 12 Squadron into wartime footing in Darwin. The unit dispersed to Batchelor Airfield with A flight at the Civil Aerodrome. American B-17 flying fortresses staged through Darwin en route to the Philippines, while the squadron's Wirraways conducted intensified patrols amid Japanese advances through Hong Kong, Malaya, and Burma. The fall of Singapore in February 1942 heightened fears of invasion, amplifying Crawford's recollections of urgency and vulnerability in Australia's northern defences. Darwin had been on edge for months. Then, just before 10 in the morning on February 19th, 1942, the sky filled with Japanese bombers. For Bob Crawford and 12 Squadron, the war arrived with devastating force.
It must have been about 9 o'clock in the morning. I was walking in the THC, and George Save said to me, he said, "Oh, where's your navigator?" I said, "Oh, he's doing his washing." He said, "Oh, go and get him out. Go and get him out." He said, we got to go flying. And I said to him, "Oh, well," I said, "what do we got to do?" He said, "Oh, we've got to protect the ships in the harbour." And so I had to go and find Harry Susans, which was my navigator. And he was bitching like Billy-O because he's up to his eyeballs in shorts and washing. And he said, "Oh, what have we got to do?" I said, "We've got to fly and protect the ships in the harbour." So he got dressed, and about 20 to 10 that was, I was just walking with Harry in between the huts, and George Save came in a canter up to me, and I said to him, I said, "I'm very sorry, sir." I said, "I haven't got the aircraft out yet." He says, "Bugger the aircraft." He says, "Look." And I looked up in the sky, and here was all the bombers that were over Darwin. And of course, we then just went straight into the bush round where we had slit trenches and where we had our aircraft hidden or camouflaged. And they bombed and strafed Darwin, the permanent aerodrome. They bombed and strafed our civil aerodrome. And after the raid was over, all hell broke loose, and we were trying to put out fires on. We had ammunition in some of the huts, and that was on fires and all these things like that. But we then had got orders to go over to the permanent aerodrome to get bombs from the bomb dump over there and bring them back and load the aircraft up with the semi-armour piercing bombs, which was we put 4 on each aircraft. We had 3. And a remarkable thing was that none of our aircraft were damaged. They had a aircraft in the Belmont hangar which was doing a service. It had all the sides off it. It was standing up on jacks, and to the aircraft, no damage at all. We went over the civil aerodrome, and I've never seen such an exodus of people in all my life. We had to drive from the civil aerodrome across into the main road, which goes right through to Birdham. And the exodus was absolutely unreal of people in every sort of vehicle that would move, was just leaving Darwin.
Number 12 Squadron endured the first Japanese air raid on Darwin, where 188 aircraft from 4 carriers bombed the town, destroying 2 Wirraways on the ground, along with a hangar and stores. The squadron dispersed its Wirraways, with A Flight at the civil aerodrome where Crawford was based. The attack caused significant damage and triggered a civilian exodus from Darwin. The squadron also lost a considerable portion of its stores in the raid, underscoring the vulnerability of Australia's northern defences as Japanese forces advanced in the Pacific. Surviving aircraft immediately supported post-raid efforts, dropping supplies to shipwreck survivors and conducting reconnaissance patrols amid fears of a land invasion.
Next day, I was just dispatched to go out and fly a big course right out to sort of southwest from Darwin, out as far as I go and fly right out to sea and fly a course to up to Bathurst Island to see if any warships will come in at all. And I had the instructions to report the position and then attack. Fortunately, there was no invasion force coming, and I finished up at Bathurst Island, and then I flew back to Darwin. And from then on, in Darwin, it was very interesting. Had lots of things to do, looking for ships that were missing and whatnot. I had to go to Bathurst Island, and I found an American ship that had been bombed and caught on fire, and it had drifted onto Bathurst Island. And although it was a large ship of about 4,000 or 5,000 tonnes, it was I found about 4 or 5 bodies on the sand, American bodies, but I just came back and reported it again.
12 Squadron continued search and rescue operations from Darwin. By early March 1942, amid post-raid dispersal and personnel rotations, the squadron was reuniting at Batchelor Airfield after the chaos of the Darwin bombing. Bob Crawford, now a flight sergeant with nearly a year in the top end, was suddenly told he was leaving.
And when I was at Batchelor, they said to me, "You've been posted." I said, "What do you mean I've been posted?" He said, "You and Butler have been posted to 75 Squadron." And at that time we'd just changed COs, and that was Squadron Leader Blackjack Walker, Brian Walker, who was the CO, and he called us in and he said, butler called bent over and we said, "What for?" He said, "I'm going to kick your backside." So we said, "What's that for?" He said, "Well, you're experienced blokes and I'm losing you and I'm just getting you blokes and nobody that knows much around about the place." So, and I said, "Well, what's this 75 Squadron?" He said, "I wouldn't have a clue." And he said, "I don't know what aeroplanes they've got." And he said, "They're at Townsville, you've got to go to Townsville."
Bob was on his way to Townsville and number 75 Squadron, equipped with the powerful P-40 Kitty Hawk. Under new CO Squadron leader Brian Walker, the squadron dealt with losses from the February 19 raid and subsequent attacks, relocating to Pell Airfield from July to September, while Batchelor hosted US Army Air Force units. Number 12 Squadron, re-equipped with Vultee Vengeance dive bombers from October 1942. Receiving these aircraft was popular among personnel, as it promised a more active role in the war, though routine patrols continued initially. Training intensified at Batchelor, including fighter interception tests in May 1943. Ordered to Moeroke, Dutch New Guinea, in May under number 72 Wing. The ground party of 270 arrived on the 8th of July 1943 aboard the Charles P. Steinmetz, building a jungle camp with limited resources. The air echelon operated from Cooktown, Queensland, for anti-submarine patrols until full relocation by November. The squadron's first offensive strike occurred on the 18th of June against Selaru Island villages, believed to house Japanese airfield workers, led by Flight Lieutenant Cyril McPherson, demonstrating Vultee Vengeance accuracy in vertical dives.
We went first to Cooktown, where we stayed there for probably about 6 weeks, 2 months maybe. And then we did go to Moeroke in New Guinea, and we found that there were also 2 other squadrons there already. Being Dutch New Guinea, the Dutch had a twin-engine light bomber squadron, and we also had a Kitty Hawk fighter squadron, number 86, and our squadron, number 12, with the Vultee Vengeance, made 3 squadrons all using the same airstrip, which was made of PSP, or pierced steel plating.
Moeroke's airstrip, a patchwork of steel plates, hosted a multinational force. Under squadron leader Wilfred Guthrie, the unit's vengeances focused on maritime patrols over the Arafura Sea, extending from earlier Cooktown operations. Philip's arrival coincided with camp establishment in mosquito-infested jungle, where personnel built facilities using a captured sawmill, emphasizing the squadron's defensive posture against possible Japanese sea incursions toward Darwin or Port Moresby. The squadron's role in Moeroke was defensive, long, monotonous patrols to spot Japanese shipping that might skirt New Guinea's coast toward Darwin or Port Moresby. For Philip, these 4-hour flights in the 2-seat Vultee Vengeance became the routine of war with little action to show for it.
Our operation mainly consisted of 4-hour patrols. The main reason for the patrols was to, if possible, find any shipping that may be coming around the coast of New Guinea into the Arafura Sea and heading towards Port Moresby down that way, or Darwin, because at that time it was considered likely that if there was a move by the Japanese to go towards Darwin or Port Moresby, around that, across the Arafura Sea, that there would be a force, a sea force, coming around that northwest part of New Guinea. It never eventuated. So the whole time that we spent in Moeroke was taken up by flying 4-hour patrols, pilot navigator, and the Vultee Vengeance 2-seater. And after we'd finished, I think it was 10 months, was the time that we spent there. We flew aeroplanes down to Lebanon, where we walked away and left them. As far as I know, they were scrapped. It was rather disappointing because we didn't really become involved in the actual operations. We did some, maybe 2 or 3, I think it was, operations which were classed as operations because we had a suspect enemy, which I don't believe existed, but we were sent out to drop bombs in an area where we were told there could be a Japanese force.
From November 1943 to August 1944, the squadron conducted daily 4-hour area Peter patrols over the Arafura Sea, using Vultee Vengeances for anti-shipping reconnaissance. The only enemy contact was a Japanese Jake floatplane sighted on the 9th of October 1943, which was unsuccessfully attacked. Phantom bombing runs targeted suspected Japanese positions, but no major combats occurred. The squadron withdrew in July 1944, ferrying aircraft to Laverton for scrapping, marking the end of its dive bomber era with 27 World War II fatalities. In February 1945, the squadron began receiving consolidated B-24 Liberators at Cecil Plains, Queensland, marking a significant transition to heavy bomber operations. By late March, the unit had relocated back to Darwin, becoming operational there in early May 1945. The squadron flew its first heavy bomber operation on 24th May 1945, joining forces with No. 21 and No. 24 squadrons to attack Japanese shipping and installations across the Timor Sea, Banda Sea, and Arafura Sea. For the next few months, the Liberators ranged across these waters, striking at what remained of Japanese positions in the region. Their final bombing raid came on the 10th of August 1945, targeting a barracks at Kendari. With Japan's surrender, the squadron's mission transformed overnight. The aircraft flew over Borneo and the Netherlands East Indies, dropping leaflets to inform civilians that the war had ended. They then dropped food and medical supplies to Allied prisoners of war camps, bringing desperately needed relief to men who had endured years of captivity. The squadron subsequently participated in repatriating these former prisoners to Australia. By February 1946, the squadron officially became a transport unit, though this new role proved short-lived. In March 1946, the unit moved to RAAF Base Amberley, where it was reduced to a care and maintenance status and placed under No. 3 Aircraft Depot. The squadron remained in this diminished state until mid-1947, when the squadron's aircrew travelled to RAAF Base Eastsale to begin conversion training on Avro Lincoln heavy bombers, returning the unit to its bomber role. The squadron continued operating Lincolns through the remainder of 1947 and into early 1948. On the 22nd of February 1948, No. 12 Squadron was officially redesignated as No. 1 Squadron, bringing to an end this chapter of the squadron's history. No. 12 Squadron was reformed at Amberley Air Base on the 3rd of September 1973 to fly the Royal Australian Air Force's first 12 new CH-47C Chinook helicopters. The helicopters were shipped from the United States to Brisbane on board the aircraft carrier HMAS Melbourne and arrived in Australia in March 1974. The squadron made its first flight in the aircraft on the 8th of July 1974 and was declared operational with the type in December that year. The Chinooks were primarily used to support Australian Army units, though they also occasionally conducted air-sea rescues, provided flood relief and performed a range of other tasks in support of the civil authorities. As we cover this era of 12 Squadron, we will introduce you to a number of aircrew and ground crew, as they recall some of the highlights of the squadron from 1973 to 1989, beginning with former squadron leader David Henderson.
Keith Jerd and myself were the first pilots posted directly off pilot's course to go to 12 Squadron, which I wasn't too happy about because I wanted to go to 9 Squadron, but having gone to 12 Squadron, I'm glad I went there first. It was a great squadron. We actually did a helicopter conversion on Iroquois at No. 5 Squadron before we then went on to 12 Squadron and did our conversion onto the Chinook.
David Henderson became one of the squadron leaders of 12 Squadron and later the executive officer with a total flying time of over 1,621 hours in the CH-47.
When I turned up at the squadron, luckily I was travelling with Keith Jerd, and so we both turned up at the squadron at the same time, but I found it very easy to assimilate into the squadron. The squadron executives were excellent, really friendly people, and the rest of the squadron members were very friendly, as were the loadmasters, flight engineers and ground crew, who had to put up with these bog rats turning up straight off pilot's course. And yeah, it was a very easy assimilation. People like Ted Bark and Des Long, who did a lot of our training. Excellent.
Peter Barrett and Brian Lugg were both pilots in 12 Squadron in the mid-1980s.
Joined 12 Squadron in 1982, was there for about 2.5 years on the Chinook.
My name's Brian Lugg. I joined 12 Squadron in 1985 with Shane and a few others, and I served till 87, and then I flew them again as D models in the Army. This is a D model, but it is one of our original Charlie model aircraft. It's much modified. Gross weight went from 46,000 pounds to 50,000 pounds, and it looks a bit different, but still a lot the same. If you have a look, all of us Charlie model pilots will recognise a lot of the things inside as being Charlie model aircraft parts. Some air forces flew them with one pilot and a navigator in the front. The crew in the back depends on whether you're manning all the guns or not. But at least one loadmaster, typically up the front, one flight engineer down the back. He's down the back because the flight engineer's panel is down the back, and where all the engine's important bits are.
That's where all the hydraulic oil leaks most of the time.
Yeah, that's right.
Hey, good morning. My name is Shane Fairweather. I flew at 12 Squadron from 1985 through till the end of 1988.
I'm Peter Brumwatson. I was in 12 Squadron by July 78 and left at the end of 1980.
So 12 Squadron was my first squadron off parts course, and it was fantastic. Had a really good time. But I think we'll just fill through a few features of the aircraft between Brum and I. And from the back here, you should be able to see that there's an engine on each side, and as we saw earlier, 2 rotors. And very simply, the way the aircraft works, those 2 engines go into a gearbox in the middle that combines the power from 2 engines and sends it forward and aft to drive both rotors.
That dispels one of the misnomers. A lot of people had that one engine drove one rotor and the other engine drove the other rotor, which was not the case, obviously. If one engine quits, you've still got power and so on, etc. And that combining transmission, as they call it in the middle, that the 2 nose boxes on the engines themselves drove, is about the size of a small bar fridge sort of a deal. And then it drove fore and aft to the front rotor and the back rotor to keep them away from each other, basically synchronised. If they got out of swank, which it did once in Germany and killed a lot of people, the rotors would tie a big knot in the middle, and it was adios amigos.
To keep 12 Squadron aircraft operational were a competent ground crew who kept these very complex machines airworthy.
Yep, I'm Bob Medwell. I was in 12 Squadron from 74 to 81. I came in as an AC and left as a corporal.
Yeah, John Lund, I was airframe fitter. I went there in March 74 and I left in January 80 to go to 481.
Straub Ellis, engine fitter from Iroquois major overhauls into the Chinooks when they first got them in 74. Then left in late 76 to go to Orion's.
Wayne Carter, nominally known as Whiskey, went to America with the Chinooks in November of 73, had 4 months in the States. Back to 12 Squadron with all the problems for the next 5 years. Then I went back to Malaya for another posting for 2.5 years, and then joined 12 Squadron for another 4.5 years after that, total 9.5 years.
Yeah, well, 3 of us were on that Wyndham trip. That was one of the things, and I think that was a pivotal part.
Yeah.
But when we first got the aircraft, I guess the big thing was when they arrived, we had to pull all the engines out because they were having turbine problems, and they had to go back to Hawker de Havilland for shop cleaning with mating bases between the disc and the turbine shaft. So consequently, that that put a big hold on a lot of things while we were assembling aircraft, pulling engines off, stripping them down and sending them away to do that part.
I reckon the Iroquois was a bit like the E.H. Holden, and it was a brilliant design, and they were designed to be maintained and fixed out in the bush. They even came with a little crane that you could plug in and change an engine or a transmission or a blade, anything out in the bush. Self-sufficient, and the Chinook was the same. It had a crane that would fit under the seat and plug into the aircraft. It was just like a big pole, like a hangman's thing, and wind up. Or you could probably, the Yanks probably had it with an electric device on it, but you could change a blade or anything. It was just amazing the forethought that goes into their equipment.
The other thing I remember about the very early days was our first deployment to Papua New Guinea, and that occurred in the end of 1978. And the reason we'd go to Papua New Guinea is because it had higher temperatures and higher mountains, and therefore you end up with higher density altitude, and we wanted to practice the crews in flying the aircraft in very high density altitude situations. While we were there, one of the Caribous from 38 Squadron, I think it was, while taking off from Elliptiman airfield in the Highlands, actually ran off the airfield and crashed off the side of the airfield. And it was decided that 12 Squadron, seeing they had Chinooks in New Guinea at the time, would go up and assist the squadron recover the aircraft because they couldn't fly it out. And so a team from Air Movements Training and Development Unit at Richmond and some of the squadron members from 38 Squadron flew up to Elliptiman and pulled the aircraft apart. They took the engines off, they took the wings off, they took the tail off, and we used a Chinook to move all of those parts, firstly down to Telefomin on the Sepik River, and then to Wewak, where it was loaded onto a Navy ship and brought back to Australia. And that aircraft was repaired and was flying again before too long.
Looking at the cockpit in a little more detail, you can see that there's quite a lot of perspex, so the visibility was great. When you're sitting in the pilot seat or the co-pilot seat, this large chin window gave you really good visibility down and out to the sides with the doors, which you could jettison if you had to in an emergency. Interestingly though, one thing that just popped into my mind is when we used to go out and do water landings in the thing, you'd actually put the aircraft into the water and then taxi around on the water, and so you'd be looking down. This bit would be submerged, so you'd be looking down through looking for fish and stuff as you went past. But it's quite a comfortable cockpit actually to fly, and it's lamb's wool seats, a lot better seating than the old Iroquois.
Oh yeah, the first water landings, that was at Mugra Dam. Yeah. Well, there's aircraft capable of landing on water, not necessarily ocean water, because there's a lot of magnesium elite. Saltwater elite magnesium away. So it's just Mugra Dam is just ordinary fresh water. There's a few bits and pieces you have to blank off with a bit of masking tape, but other than that, you just land on the dam. But we had a couple of Iroquois buzzing around us, like blowflies, taking photos, and we did probably about a dozen landings. And one of the landings was at about 20 mile an hour, 20 knots. Snow Batterham, he's, for one of them, the fast landing, he's laying on the ramp looking back down, and as we came in, the aircraft's coming in, and it was like a speedboat slowing down. A big wake came over the back and washed him halfway up the aircraft. There's no damage because there's no electrics on the floor or anything. There's poor old Snow just about drowning with all this water, so they had to lift the aircraft up and let Snow dry himself out and get himself ready, and then drop the ramp a bit and lift the nose of the Chinook up so we can drain all the water out of our Chinook. So that was quite good, we thought.
As far as water landings are concerned, although it's a helicopter and it's got lots of holes in it, they used to bung it up as best they could. But you'd land in water with the ramp up, and you could actually put the thing down and actually taxi around. Special forces overseas used to have a dam affair they'd put across the rear of the cabin, and they could actually launch inflatable boats out the back, which I don't think we ever did. Do you remember doing that?
No.
But look, even though it was capable of landing in the water, after a while it would fill up. So you'd have to get airborne again before it got too heavy and you couldn't get out, or you'd have to find a nice shallow.
Like the boat ramp at Mulgrave.
Boat ramp to get out, and then you'd undo all the bungs and all the water drain out for half an hour.
The Canadians used to run
The Canadians did, but we didn't. The Canadians had the dam fitted, but the Canadians also had a power down ramp. Because if you were floating in the water and you tried to put the ramp down, it wouldn't go down. It'd just sit there, because ours was a gravity down ramp. It's a big boat underneath. There's a false floor inside, and if you do land it on the water, there's a fair amount of maintenance work that goes on. They've got to pull the floor up and check it out and clean it out. The other thing is, though, that all the weight's up the top. Even though it's a big flat boat, the weight's up the top. So if the engines stop while you're on the water, it rolls over.
Probably the first significant exercise I remember was Hold Tight and Tiger Tail, which was an army support exercise up at Townsville. And the thing I remember about that was that we had 2 aircraft, and we had one of the first camouflaged aircraft. Previous to that, they'd all been green with a white roof, but we started camouflaging the aircraft, and we had the first aircraft camouflaged up there. Some of the exercises, the army exercises, occurred in the high range training area above Townsville, and it was reasonable altitude, like you could get up to about 2,000 feet altitude, and in summertime it was quite hot, and aircraft suffer when they're high and hot. It's referred to as density altitude, and the higher the density altitude, the less the aircraft can carry. And the big difference between the Chinook and the Iroquois is the Chinook is far more capable of carrying heavy loads in high density altitude situations, whereas an Iroquois at that time, and even later the Black Hawks, could probably only carry 1 gun and 1 bag of ammunition and possibly some of the crew. The Chinook could carry 2 guns, 4 bags of ammunition and all the crews inside the aircraft in one go. So the Chinook gave the Army and the Air Force the capability of lifting far bigger loads and far heavier loads and carrying them further.
In August 1980, a 12 squadron crew undertook the longest CH-47C flight, at the time, to Malaysia, to retrieve a crashed RMAF S-61 Nuri. The aircraft left Amberley for Indonesia via the Timor Sea, and then on to Butterworth in Malaysia. The aircraft returned to Amberley by the 9th of September, having flown over 14,000 kilometres.
Looked at my logbook there, it was the 25th of August. We left from Amberley, Longreach, Mount Isa, Darwin, Bali, Singapore, Butterworth, and then operated out of Butterworth around the jungle because we were picking up a Malaysian helicopter that had spudded into the jungle up there, a thing called a Nuri, which was basically a Sea King, Malaysian war paint on it sort of thing. That was the start, and like I said, once they found out what we could do, and wow, look at this, they started finding other work for us, and it went on for a period of time, a couple of weeks or whatever, up there, and then back, reverse the track and come home. But the trip across the Timor Sea, they weren't sure how the hell we were going to do this without drowning, and so they had, the fuel was fixed, the oil consumption was fixed, they had an Orion ghosting us the whole way across there for top cover. The idea, apparently, was that they were going to throw us life rafts so we went into the water and then fly away. That would have been reassuring, But man, we were looking at whales and bloody dolphins and stuff across there. We're only flying at, 1,000, 1,500 feet the whole way. There was no point in going to altitude. And drilled across, and Orion would come past every now and then. And it worked perfectly well. We had a great time up there, socially and that, and the mess at Butterworth and stuff. We were definitely from out of town. No one had seen a Chinook up there before.
As far as ground crew are concerned, I think the guys at 12 Squadron were some of the best people that I've met in the Air Force. They were very capable, as were the senior NCOs and the warrant officers who ran the engineering side of things. Mind you, when we did a test flight after a major maintenance, we always took the ground crew who did the maintenance with us on the test flight. So it was in their best interests to make sure they did a good job.
One of the best things when you used to go on trips, exercise, etc., you have the 2 flight fitters, 2 crews and 2 pilots, so it's a crew of 6 basically. When we get to our destination, like overnight or where it is, while we're doing our after flights and all that, any oil sampling and all that, the crews used to get in and tie the aircraft down for us and have it all locked up. The next morning they'll come and take the tie downs off the blades, and by that time, if they had any cargo coming, we'd help them load the aircraft and tie it down. So it was each helping each other. Good team,
Yeah, it was a
really.
team. It was a team environment.
Really good. Yeah, it was a team environment.
Very good with comradeship, because everyone got in and helped one another. We knew the tasking and what had to be done to complete the day's mission, and what had to be done afterward when it was finished the day, ready for the next day. So that had to be planned ahead. But everyone more or less grouped together and lived in the same tent, motel. So it was a family affair, for want of a better word. And towards later on, when people got cross-trained, that you could help one another in doing other trade jobs as well.
But a lot of this, what happened in 12 Squadron for me personally, being the boggy coming along, but to my later service career, what I learnt in 12 Squadron influenced a lot the way I managed things further on into the trade sponsor job and that sort of thing, knowing about multi-skilling and cross-trade training and all that sort of thing. So it was pretty advantageous. The flight fitter course was fairly was in depth enough, and guys like Whiskey kept a pretty good eye on some of us black-handers that started playing around with wires. Sorry, Whiskey.
And I guess from my initial training in America, where we did the United States Army course at Fort Eustis, Virginia, we probably learned what not to do.
I think what Shane was alluding to before about being a great squadron and stuff like that, that was the best part of this deal. This squadron was probably the best kept secret in the Air Force, and I think Hendo and these other guys will attest to that you just never knew what was going to happen next, It was just a great place for trips turning up out of the blue, and it was just wild and woolly sort of stuff sometimes. Do you ever have anything sort of along those lines happen?
Yeah, many. So it was, you never knew what was going to happen, both on the ground around the squadron and in the air. The aircraft had a great skill to throw things at you that you would never expected. But and let's come back, but just in terms of basics, because a lot of people don't look at a Chinook and say, how the hell does that thing work? Igor Sikorsky, who was a helicopter builder and designer, someone asked him probably in the late 70s if he's going to build a tandem rotor helicopter, which the Chinook is. And he said, why would I do that when I can't even work out how a single rotor helicopter works? So aerodynamically, this is very complex, but in simple terms, so in many air shows and public events I went to, people would say to me, well, which pilot drives the front rotor and which pilot drives the back rotor? Yeah. So no, it doesn't work that way, and it's actually really quite simple. It makes the aircraft very manoeuvrable. If you look at it, when you want to go forward, the 2 rotors do that. When you want to slow down, the 2 rotors do that. If you want to go right, they do that. If you want to go left, and then they can do that. So you can turn it around any pivot around any point. So it was incredibly manoeuvrable for the size of the aircraft. And as Hendo, like you said earlier, it was quick. It could do 175 knots.
Yeah.
So for a helicopter is very, very fast. But the complexity of what happens up there, and up in the front of the cockpit is what we used to call the spaghetti cupboard, because
the mixing closet.
Yeah, you have standard helicopter controls for both crews that go into a cupboard in there, and it literally looks like spaghetti with rods and cogs and cams that go up to those 2 heads to make those rotors do the things I indicated earlier.
I don't know how true it was, but around the squadron at the time, they used to say that the engineers that designed this machine and that the aerodynamicists and so on had very little idea of actually what was going on aerodynamically between those rotors when they intermingled in their turn. They weren't exactly sure what was happening, but it worked, so they kept at it. But yeah, it was just an amazing bit of gear, and also an amazing squadron to be in at the time. Like I said, it was the best kept secret of the Air Force.
Yeah, one of the really great things about the squadron was it was all the air crew and the ground crew all in together.
Yeah.
And when we deployed, we all worked as one team. And other squadrons I went to later on, that culture didn't exist.
So here we are in the cockpit. Hendo sitting in the captain's seat and me in the co-pilot seat. The flight instruments are essentially duplicated on both sides, which was great, instead of having to look from one side across to the other, which is moderately like that in the Iroquois. But this, you could actually concentrate on your primary flight instruments and rotor RPM, engine, some of the engine parameters here, and then while the other pilot who was not flying could do the radios or whatever else. So moving across from left to right, if you like, as I said, flight instruments here in this section here, which is a bit difficult to see, but this is the the caution panel. Each pilot's got a master caution light above, which would illuminate if something happened down here, just to draw your attention to whatever the issue was, and then you would deal with it.
Usually the caution light will illuminate if any of the aircraft systems are out of normal operating limits, and the master caution is right in the middle of your view, so it alerts you to the fact that one of the lights is illuminated. Next to that we have all the engine instruments and transmission instruments, which gives you temperatures and pressures, and there are selector switches which allow you to check each engine and each transmission individually. Working our way down, there's radio equipment. Oh yeah. And up here above are the fire warning handles, and if there is a fire in either of the engines, they will illuminate, and you can then isolate that engine, shut it down, and fire a fire extinguisher into the engine that's on fire.
And that was I might have got to say, having come out of Iroquois, which is what I started on, one, having two engines was great, but also having fire handles that you could actually had the option of trying to put the fire out, which was even better too, instead of having to descend with flames and things coming out of the back of the engine.
Also, you can divert both of the fire bottles into the one engine, so if the first fire bottle doesn't put the fire out, you can switch it to the other fire bottle and fire that into the engines. Down below here is mostly radios. In the C model Chinook, used to have the engine condition levers, which I guess you'd refer to as the throttles, down here, but they're now being replaced and moved up to the overhead panel up here. Also up here, we've got some lights. We can operate red and green lights in the back of the aircraft to alert troops to certain conditions, in particular for parachuting. One incident that occurred, I was a junior pilot on the squadron, just arrived, and I had a senior squadron leader flying as the captain, and he told me to fly the aircraft and he'd look after the lights, and I was flying along there. We were coming up to the drop zone, and I said red on, so he put the red on. That indicated to the paratroopers they were about to jump, and then I said green on, and he flicked it back to the centre position, which turned all the lights off. And I looked in the rear view mirror, which is here, and you can see out the back, and I saw that the paratroopers weren't jumping. And I looked up at the switch and realised it was in the centre position, and I said to him, you didn't put the green on. And so immediately he reached up and put the green on, but by this time we were past the drop zone, and we dropped about half a dozen paratroopers into backyards in Watsonia down in Melbourne, and there was paratroopers landing on hills hoists and all sorts of things.
it appears to be a fairly complicated cockpit for a 2-engine sort of helicopter, but once you got used to it, it was actually fairly easy to operate and to move around. And we're just sitting here, both of us, when we jumped back in, sunk into the lamb's wool covered seats, and you just took me back.
It's like coming home.
Coming home, yeah, they're very comfortable seats to sit in.
Yeah. And there's also windows here which you can open and shut. And because air is flowing past the outside, it creates a low pressure area outside the window. So the air in the aircraft comes from the cabin behind us into the cockpit and out the side windows. And quite often people riding in the Chinook would get airsick and start vomiting, and if that happened, you immediately shut these windows to stop all that air in the back from coming up and getting into the cockpit.
Just reminded me of something that happened to me. I hadn't been on the squadron for that long, and we went flying across to Western Australia for, I think it was exercise Kangaroo 83, so most of the Air Force deployed to Roebourne, which is in the middle of nowhere. And we were crossing over from probably Mount Isa, somewhere across the Northern Territory. And I was navigating, so I had my map all folded up here, navigating. Unfortunately, I got it too close to the window, and it disappeared.
Sucked out the window.
So that was the end of my map.
That's happened more than once on the squadron. Yeah. I was night flying one night with a junior officer, and he was navigating. He had his wander light, and here's the wander light up here, which is used at night time for reading your maps. And I asked him, where are we? And he said, well, I don't know. I said, well, get your wander light and look at your map. And he said, I can't. I said, why? He said, well, my wander light got sucked out the window, and even though it's on a cord, he couldn't pull it back in because it had wrapped around the HF antenna. So we had to land and unwrap it from the HF antenna and bring it back inside. The Chinook, when it's on the ground on all 4 wheels, can be steered by unlocking the rear wheels, and we've got a hydraulic control which allows us to turn one of the back wheels and actually drive it on the ground like a car. So the rotors are tilted forward enough to actually produce a forward thrust, and then it rolls on the ground, and we just use that to control the direction we go on the ground. If we're going to do a running landing, we actually lock those rear wheels so they can't turn. Otherwise it'd be like being on casters and you'd be all over the place.
So that's locked. That's unlocked, in which case they're castering, and that is engaging the steering. It's very effective, but until you get used to it, it can swing the back out fairly quickly. So you've got to think about where the back is going rather than kind of where the
it's not like a car where your front wheels steer. It's more like a forklift where your back wheels are the steering wheels. But the seats are probably one of the most comfortable seats in the Air Force.
Yep, I reckon.
Probably only equalled by the Hercules. They're very soft, got lamb's wool seat covers, beautiful view. Actually, I had an epiphany one day. We were flying down along the New South Wales coast, and a co-pilot was flying. I had a cup of coffee, and we were about 50 feet above the surf going down the coast, and we had the sun coming in through the top windows, and I looked down through the bottom windows and there were dolphins jumping through crystal clear water, and I said to myself, well, if this isn't the best way to earn a living, well, there isn't a better one.
Yeah. And that's one of the great things about flying helicopters. You went to all sorts of really interesting places. It was busy, but there was always something different going on, wasn't there?
You can be on an exercise and be tasked to go and do one job, and halfway through that you'll get called up and say, when you finish that, go and do something else.
The other great thing about the Chinook, which we might talk about later, is how much party gear you can stick in the back if you were going on an exercise. The poor army would be out there living in foxholes and in dirt and stuff, and we'd turn up and drive our little short wheelbase Land Cruiser off the back with a trailer full of refrigerators, generators, party lights, VCRs and TVs. Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the flight engineer's end of the aeroplane. Both engines, there's one just outside there and another one on the other side there, and the main aft transmission is directly above my head underneath all these panels. Just slightly at the back there you'll see the auxiliary power unit that's basically provides us with hydraulic power and electrical power while the main engines aren't running. The reason it's the flight engineer's end of the aeroplane is the flight engineer's panel down the back here that monitors all the hydraulic pressures, also the transmission chip detectors. Basically those chip detectors will tell us if there's any loose metal running around the transmissions. That's never a good thing for any helicopter. The big handle that you see here is how we pump up the accumulator for the APU if we need to. The Charlie model had exactly the same. It's a hydraulic start for the auxiliary power unit. More modern helicopters actually have a nice little electric motor that does that for us without any effort. Interesting feature for the Chinook, the Charlie model had the same. We can actually put hydraulic fluid into the systems in flight, so we can top it up, pump it up with its little handle, and if we start losing hydraulic fluid through a leak, we can actually top it up while you're in flight. Everything in the airplane as far as controls are concerned are hydraulics, so losing hydraulic fluid again is a pretty severe outcome. Above my head here is mainly hydraulics, all the various hydraulic systems. We have two major hydraulic systems on the aircraft that keep the flight controls going. A few other bits and pieces you can see down the side here are little stands that go under the ramp to hold it up off the ground if you want to do some maintenance, or when you have to load something directly straight into the aircraft. The ramp controls are here, so the flight engineer again can drive the ramp up or down. Both in this model and in the Charlie, the ramp is hydraulically powered up, and then it is locked in place once it's up. But when you want to put it down, it's gravity only down. So when you take it to down, the locks are pulled out and the ramp just falls down below you. When I visited the factory when these aircraft were being revamped into Delta models, they had a rack of ramps in the factory, and a whole bunch of ramps had blue pencil marks and texture marks around all these holes in the ramps, and the ramps on the other end were all shiny and pristine and clean and tidy. And I said, oh, that's those ramps that you've got over there, they're obviously the ones that you've repaired. And they went, no, they're yours. They're the ones off your aircraft. And they were pristine, they were lovely.
Australia is a very dusty environment, and we did eventually learn how to land in really dusty conditions, and that is basically you just keep moving forward rather than come to the hover, and you get the back wheels on the ground before the dust catches up with you, and once you've got the back wheels on the ground, you're fairly stabilised and you can sit the aircraft down. Well, some of the original pilots that were here when the Chinook first came into service actually did their training in the United States. So they went to America, and a lot of that would have been covered in their training in the US. But I don't know if the US has got more dust than us, but we've got a lot of dust.
Down the side here are the fuel tanks. There's, from memory, long memory, three fuel tanks, about 7,000 pounds. But you'll see here, these are the fuel filler points, and they had to be fueled, gravity fueled, like you'd fuel a car by each point.
No pressure refueling?
No, and it took a while, and I had several occasions flying in New Guinea where we had to hand pump 7,000 pounds of fuel into the aircraft in the stinking heat. It was hot. The Squadron had a very good safety record. I wouldn't say they were the most reliable aircraft. They were good when you had them on deployment, when you were flying them a lot, but they were in those days very maintenance intensive and required a lot of effort and a lot of work to keep them flying. But the maintenance crews were fantastic. They never had any lack of confidence in the airworthiness of the aircraft.
I remember
when
that
we took it flying.
One of the kangaroo exercises. You guys remember up there, the Kangaroo 3 or something? We needed an engine change on the tarmac at Rocky. With about 1,000 different other international aircraft around and dust and God knows what. And these guys just turned up. They had an engine flowing in, and these guys were up on those ramps in about 42 degrees heat and changed that bloody engine in just jolly quick time. It's just amazing. Did a great job. They were able to do that kind of thing because they were on side. They were good-natured guys and that.
The amount of tools we carry, a lot of people joked about the size of our flyaway kit. We had, actually just in the circuit, we'd fly with a Caterpillar kit full of tools. There's a big toolbox like this with a case of jet oil and a case of hydraulic oil and some rags and a bucket. That was just in the circuit.
But the trailer with their flyaway kits and spares, they took up big trailer we had to push up in the aircraft with spare radios and spare pumps and whatever we could, what we thought were the major problems could go wrong, and O-rings and seals and things like that.
I can't say enough about the loadmasters and flight engineers who flew with us. They were excellent, particularly the flight engineers. Quite often we'd be in the middle of nowhere and get mechanical problems, and I don't know of many situations where they couldn't fix the thing to at least get us back to somewhere to get help. They did an excellent job. I think the thing about 12 Squadron was that when we went away, we took our engineering people with us, and they lived with us in the field, and that's where we spent most of our time, living with the Army under tents in the field. Unlike the transport drivers who used to stay under 6-star hotels. And the only reason they stayed under 6 stars is because there's no 7-star. we used to live under 1,000 stars, and you get a certain camaraderie building up when you're living in the field with the crew, the ground crew and the flight engineers and loadmasters. I remember one loadmaster, Sandy Roman. He was a chef before he joined the Air Force, I believe, and he could make an excellent meal out of a ration pack. And Sandy was always cooking and getting up at about 4 o'clock in the morning and whistling around the campfire until someone yelled out from their tent, "For God's sake, shut up!" We used to deploy into the field a lot of the time. And we would carry vehicles with us in the aircraft. We'd carry tentage, we'd carry camouflage nets. Mind you, the Chinook was so big that we had great difficulty trying to camouflage it, but all our vehicles and all our camps were camouflaged. And we took fridges with us, of course, and piles of soft drinks. Quite often we'd set up a little stall and sell the soft drinks at cost price to the Army guys trudging past. I must also say that we did a lot of work with the Army's 9 PET platoon, petroleum platoon, because they were the guys who set up the refuelling and arming points and would refuel us when we needed fuel out in the field. Quite often they'd have large bladders of fuel, and we'd come in, we'd blow crap all over them, and at the end of the day these guys just had 2 little white rings where they were wearing their goggles, and we had a lot of time for the 9 PET platoon guys, and we'd provide them with free drinks, and quite often they'd camp with us as well, so they were great guys, the 9 PET platoon.
Flying New Guinea, it was challenging. Particularly high altitudes. The air gets less dense and you don't generate as much power from the engines or the rotors. So the aircraft has amazing single engine performance down at these sort of altitudes, but at high altitude it's still pretty good. You can fly away, but at the really high altitudes, often you drift down height. The height at which you could hold was below ground level, so you had to be really, really careful. So, you know, whilst it was a really capable aircraft, in a normal operating environment, New Guinea really challenged. And because it was so powerful, we could operate above 10,000 feet, which meant we had to operate in oxygen. So we would take portable oxygen bottles and to operate those high altitudes.
We've been involved in a number of ship rescues with salvage companies. One was in Port Hedland over in Western Australia, where an iron ore carrier ran aground in the channel leading into Port Hedland, and 12 Squadron was involved in that by lifting a bulldozer and other equipment out to the ship. And then what they did was cut holes in the bulkheads, and they bulldozed the iron ore from one end of the ship to the other, where they had a set of conveyors, and they just put the iron ore over the side. And they did that until they got enough weight off the nose of the ship to lift it. Another ship rescue we did was out here on Bribie Island. There was a ship that was coming into the port of Brisbane, and he failed to make a turn at one of the channel markers and ran straight aground on the northern tip of Bribie Island. And so we started flying the containers on the ship across the Pumicestone Passage to Caloundra, where we commandeered a large parking area, and the Chinooks would bring the containers over, put them on the car park, then a large forklift would lift them, put them on the back of trucks, and then they'd go straight to Brisbane. And we lifted enough containers off the front of the ship so that, again, the bow of the ship at high tide was afloat, and they managed to get the ship off. The only difficulty we found there is they would tell us how much a container weighed, and when we pulled power, when we got to the power required to lift something of that weight, there was no way it was going to move. So a lot of these containers were a lot heavier than they stated on the manifest.
In this outfit, you had no idea what was going to happen. And the classic was, one Friday morning I went there was nothing much on. We used to have a Friday afternoon barbecue, I think, didn't we, out the side of the building. And by 4 o'clock, we were loaded up and heading to New Guinea to go to Karkar Island because it had blown up and we had to evacuate the place. And there were bloody hercs and all sorts of stuff going on. That sort of thing could happen, you know, out of nothing. Next thing you know, you had a 2-week bloody mission on, sort of thing, and it was outstanding in that regard. We picked up 100-foot power poles at Moreton Island, dropped them into holes in the ground with about an 8-inch give on either side, and guys with ropes to guide them down. The crews did an amazing job. Just like we were talking about the hooks before, there was only one hook in the hellhole, and the boys were there, these 100-foot bloody poles, and dropping them into these holes in the ground. I think it was Skippy O'Dwyer was flying them when they went and picked the carriages off the side of the Blue Mountains after that came off the rails up there in the hills. Yeah, at Glenbrook, yeah, picking up trains off tracks and stuff on the sides of hills.
You know, I did things like, you know, routine operations, SAR, search and rescue, pulling people off tops of mountains, putting poles up, antennas up, flying prime ministers, feeding sheep in floods, picking up
boats. Yeah, boats. Yeah.
Once when I was acting commanding officer of the squadron, this is in my second tour, I got a phone call in the middle of the night from Headquarters Air Command down at Glenbrook saying that a yacht had been dismasted and was in trouble out off the coast. So at 2 o'clock in the morning I had to ring around, get a crew together, get the engineers to come in and get an aircraft ready, and we launched an aircraft just after dawn to go out, and that was a very difficult rescue. Jack Frost and Fergie were the pilots on board, and they went out and they found this yacht, and they managed to get all the crew off the yacht and safely back to Brisbane Airport. It was very difficult for the same reason that the tower positioning was difficult, because in a rolling sea it's very difficult to maintain a steady hover. And Jack Frost did a great job in getting those people up. With that rescue, we did use a State Emergency Service winch man to go down into the water, because most of our loadmasters are a bit old and didn't fancy going in, and we didn't have the equipment, we didn't have wetsuits and that sort of thing. So Brett Mitchell was a winchman, civilian winchman, and he went down and actually got the people into the harness so we could winch them up into the aircraft. And we had a doctor on board, Greg Hampson, and Greg did a good job looking after the people once they were winched up into the aircraft. This was around the period when the squadron was looking down the barrel of disbandment. So thinking ahead, I grabbed my video camera and gave it to Greg Hampson to take out on the aircraft, and he took some video of the rescue, and all that video was on the lead. It was the lead item on every channel in the news that night.
I remember I got married in 1987. I think I was only home for 3 months of that year, and most of it was never planned. You just go to work, and one day you're off somewhere. And particularly flying in New Guinea, whilst it was challenging, it was amazing. And Brum spoke about Karkar Island. We always went to Karkar to practice, and this is just an idea of the sort of variety we did. We had to put some volcanologists into the crater.
That's right.
So the crater's about a mile across, and it's about 1,000 feet deep. So we dropped this crew in on top of this rock, and they said, well, it'll be about 20 minutes. So we flew around, and we couldn't find them when we got back. Just couldn't find them. Hell, what are we going to do? And it wasn't until we realised that we actually put them on a rock as big as this hangar, and that we were looking for big people on a rock. Once we realised we were looking for small people on a massive rock, we found them okay and got them out of there. But that was just spectacular to do that sort of thing.
We was doing the same thing actually. We went up there, it was almost identical. We were up there just after it had blown, and they said, the volcano had blown, days previous or something like that, and we got up there and we were looking around the rim of this thing. They said there was some volcanologists, we lost them sort of thing. Oh, where were they sort of thing? And they said, over there, and the edge of this volcano had this big gap in it, a big hole, and that's where it had gone out, and these guys went with it.
At that time, the Chinook was the only aircraft with enough lift capability to be able to do those sorts of jobs. Quite often we were very close to our limit as far as being able to lift particular loads. I remember there was a D4 bulldozer up in New Guinea that we had to fly into, I think the place was called Canabia, and they were going to build a road from there down to Kerama, and to shorten the time they decided to start at both ends and work towards the middle, so we had to fly this D4 bulldozer up to up to Canabia. And the first day we tried to do it, there was low cloud, and so the fellow in charge of the mission up there, who'd been waiting like 4 years for this bulldozer to arrive, all he saw was the bulldozer fly past, and because of the cloud he couldn't see the Chinook. So he just saw this bulldozer go past. However, we did get it in the next day.
I did flood relief with a Chinook. It was incredible because you could put it right on the spot. A year later, I had to do it in the C-130. We basically had to bomb it.
Spread it all over the place.
But there were sort of two things I remember really clearly from that. One is we couldn't navigate because all the roads were covered with water, so we got the Shire Council power lines to navigate with, because then we had no GPS. But you'd land at a property, because normally the homesteads are on a hill, and the cowcocky would get on board, and the first one we learnt the trick. They'd put the headset on, and you'd say, "Where do you need to go, mate?" Over there. So we turned their volume right up. But then you'd get airborne, and it'd say, "Which way, mate?" "Oh, I don't know. I've never seen it from here."
Yeah.
So it's okay if you come out of your house on your horse. Which gate do you go through? I'll go through that gate. Then where do you go? And that's how we'd find the sheep. But it was but amazing. You just imagine a Chinook full of hay bales, and just land and pull them out. We did one job in New Guinea where we right up into the sort of Western Highlands that had not seen much in the way of white civilization, and we had to deliver a big bulldozer and 3 lifts up there because they'd found a lot of gold. So the first lift we did, they were throwing spears at us as we came in, and we dropped off an interpreter, and I thought, that's the bravest man on the planet. And then by the time we came back, the second lift was all a bit quieter, and the third lift we arrived, and because we had to land to pick up the interpreter, they've killed several pigs and are all in their good gear. And
it was a party.
Yeah, it was, and the interpreter says the chief's invited you to lunch. I go, I'm not shutting the helicopter down up here. So he said, he's killed 4 of his pigs. He's going to lose great face.
Did you get it to go, mate? One of those little styrene packs?
So I thought, oh, okay. I said, go and ask him in front of everybody to come for a fly with us. And so he couldn't refuse. So he jumps in, and we get airborne. He's sitting looking out that door. It was pretty comfy because that was the same view out of his house up in the Highlands. We flew around a bit, and the crew took him out to look through the hook hole. That's the point at which he realised
he was airborne.
And he was really scared. He was terrified. So anyway, we got him back up the front. We landed and got him out, and the whole tribe rushed up to him and around him. The interpreter got in and said, let's go. He's going to be, he and his sons, his grandsons, his great-grandsons are going to be chief forever, because as far as they're concerned, he's been with the gods.
Yeah.
And in fact, in Papuan, in Pidgin English, they used to call the Chinook the mixed master belong to Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Generally, our working relationship with the Army was excellent, particularly with the artillery. We did a lot of work moving artillery and ammunition and people, and I became very close friends with a lot of the artillery officers that worked in the field with us. Occasionally you would come upon someone who didn't fully understand the limitations of the aircraft and be insisting on us doing something which was completely out of the question. I remember one Army officer wanted us to continue to move his guns into the night, and it was an administrative move, which means it wasn't a tactical move, and we tried to explain to him that to fly the guns at night, we have to climb to a higher altitude to get safety clearance from the mountains. We have to fly larger patterns and then do slow approaches in to the night landing aids, and that it would take us far longer to move the guns in at night time than if we just knocked off at dusk, and the next morning we could put them in far faster. And he would get all his guns into the location faster doing that, because we would have run out of crew duty time, which meant that we couldn't start the next morning until later because we'd flown into the night. And so doing it the way he wanted to do it, he wouldn't have got his guns in as fast. But you can't explain that to them sometimes. When the squadron was disbanded, I was the executive officer of the squadron, working for Graham Chalmers. And we argued strongly against shutting the squadron down, because there was nothing in Australia, even though the Black Hawk had been introduced into service, there was nothing in Australia that could do what the Chinooks could do. And the story that was spread around was that the Black Hawks could take up the slack and do everything the Chinooks could do. But that was nowhere near the truth, and we argued strongly against shutting the squadron down. But funnily enough, I was also an instructor on the Chinook, and I had 2 new pilots with me in the aircraft doing General Flying 1, which was the first flight of their training on the Chinook. And I was out in the training area with these two pilots, and I got a call from Air Traffic Control saying, come back now to the squadron. The Chief of Air Force wishes to talk to the squadron. And when we got back, of course, Chief of Air Force stood up and told us the squadron was being disbanded, which was a bit of a blow to these two students who'd just started their first flight. But we actually, because there was about 9 months before the squadron actually shut down, we actually finished their conversion onto type. So they got some time flying the Chinook, which I'm sure they enjoyed.
The squadron was able to get 9 Chinooks in the air for the final flight of 12 Squadron. David Henderson and 17 other pilots and co-pilots flew the 9-ship formation around southeast Queensland before retiring the aircraft on the 30th of June 1989. The formation landed at Enoggera Army Base, where an artillery battery had set up their howitzers and performed a gunfire salute for the squadron.
And that was it. That was, I think, the last flight, except for maybe a couple of test flights. And then we mothballed all the Chinooks, wrapped them in plastic, took their blades off, dehumidified them so that they wouldn't deteriorate. Navy left all their trackers sitting out in the weather down at Nowra. And then later the Army made the decision to upgrade the Chinooks to D models.
All of the people at 12 Squadron were posted to other squadrons or other units to employ their skills and capabilities. I have a photograph of the planning board at 12 Squadron, and near all the pilots and loadmasters' names, someone had drawn the type of aircraft they were going to. So a bunch of the guys went to Maritime to fly Orions, and funnily enough, next to my name was a big desk.
It's a really clever platform, the way it's designed and the way it operates. As I say, it's complex, but through life they have engineered out a lot of the issues, and now the Chinook is probably the cheapest and most reliable platform that the Australian Defence Force operates. It has been, throughout its life, the US Army and Boeing Berthold, through its various guises, has modernised the airframe and modernised it. With the latest F model is a significant step ahead of the Charlie and the Delta, and the US Army will operate Chinook for 100 years, which is a real testament to the airframe and its capability. I think it came into service in mid-60s, and they are currently planning to take it out to 2064. So it will go through some further modifications in the future that are being planned, because there's nothing that can do the job as well as Chinook can. So, but the basic design will remain. Even the Foxtrot, the latest one, has a lot of features that were still on the Charlie model. They've improved engines, they've improved gearboxes, rotor heads, automatic flight controls, but ostensibly it's still the same aircraft.
Well, I remember that we were having a ball at Amberley, an officers' mess ball, and Ted Bark asked if there was something we could do as a central motive for the table to set us apart from all the other squadrons, and I suggested that we build a baby Chinook, and he agreed, and so I got together with some of the ground crew across the road from the headquarters building, and we fashioned a baby Chinook out of foam, fiberglass and some metal, and the ground crew painted it, and it was a great hit at the ball, and later on it became a mainstay of all the Chinook displays when one of the Chinooks would give birth to the baby Chinook. Yeah, I think of all the squadrons I've been in the Air Force, 12 Squadron was the happiest squadron. It's like fantasy land. It's the happiest kingdom of them all. And of course, this is a combination of the commanding officers that we had, of the executives that we had at the squadron, of the ground crew and air crew that flew the squadron. But quite often, with a change of COs or senior executives, there will be a change in the mood at the squadron. But 12 Squadron, in the time that I was there, never seemed to change. It was always a very, very happy place to be. I'm sure there were moments where people called me a bastard and other things, but no, it was a good squadron.
In 1986, the Chiefs of Staff Committee decided to move the Iroquois and incoming Black Hawk helicopters to the Army. After 1989, only the Chinooks remained with the Air Force. Keeping just a few helicopters proved impractical, as it increased costs and made it difficult to train enough pilots. Because the Army did not want the Chinooks, the Air Force and Army agreed in May 1989 to take them out of service. Number 12 Squadron flew its last mission on the 30th of June 1989, and the Chinooks were stored for sale. Political factors played a role in withdrawing the Chinooks. The government aimed to cut costs and thought the new Black Hawks could do most of the Chinooks' jobs. However, the Army soon found this was not true, so the sale of the Chinooks was put on hold in late 1989.
In early '94, we got word that Army was looking to bring the Chinooks out of retirement and get some new D models. At that stage, we all knew that the US Army was pretty desperate for Charlie model airframes to convert because of the Middle East situation. They wanted more Chinooks. They'd just been through Gulf War I, where Chinooks had been pretty handy. So they were chasing more airframes, and the deal was that we would give them our 11 airframes, and we would get 4 in return, plus spares and engines and a bunch of other bits and pieces, and a bunch of training too. You know, you have to remember we had 4 pilots went over to the States, and probably about 15 maintainers or thereabouts to be trained over there, and then we came back and established C Squadron in 95 in Townsville.
The Army soon realised that 4 Chinooks were not enough for the Australian Defence Force, so they ordered 2 more CH-47Ds in 1998. These arrived in 2001. In mid-October 2025, 12 Squadron was officially reformed at RAAF Base Edinburgh in South Australia as the Air Force's second operational squadron for the Boeing P-8A Poseidon Maritime Patrol aircraft. Chief of Air Force Air Marshal Stephen Chappell announced the news on the 17th of October 2025, the same day Australia received its 13th P-8A Poseidon. This brought the fleet to 13 aircraft, with the 14th and last one expected in 2026. The squadron works with number 11 Squadron under number 92 Wing, sharing the fleet to improve anti-submarine warfare, maritime strike, long-range surveillance, reconnaissance, and search and rescue operations. This allows for more regular patrols over Australia's large maritime areas and supports missions across the Indo-Pacific. Reforming the unit brings back its strong anti-submarine warfare history from World War II, when it carried out reconnaissance and anti-submarine missions. This change matches Australia's 2024 National Defence Strategy, which focuses on deterrence and regional security as tensions rise in the Indo-Pacific. The 2 Poseidon squadrons will also work with the new MQ-4C Triton unmanned aircraft to improve maritime awareness. From its formation in 1939 as a general-purpose unit through maritime patrols and anti-submarine operations during World War II, including dive bombing with Vengeance aircraft and heavy bombing strikes with Liberators in the final months of the Pacific Campaign, 12 Squadron earned a distinguished place in Australia's military heritage. The squadron was revived in 1973 to operate the heavy-lift CH-47, providing vital medium lift support until budget constraints led to its retirement and disbandment in 1989. Now, the squadron will be active once more, returning to its maritime roots, ensuring persistent surveillance, anti-submarine warfare, and maritime strike capabilities, a fitting continuation of its enduring legacy of adaptability and service to Australia.